Hey everyone, what you're about to watch is not a succinct list of everything you should or shouldn't do when you are establishing Prairie. It is a conversation which my dad, the founder, Carroll Hoksbergen, is having with a former conservation board member of his county who also happened to put some of our seed and used our drill in his field, and they discuss what the best way to establish and maintain a good prairie is. It is totally worth the watch. It's gonna have most all the information you're gonna need. I get hundreds of FAQs all the time, emails, calls, and this hits on almost every single one of them. So you will not wanna miss out.
Steve Jong, he's a local farmer here, a good friend of mine from way back in the early 70s. I thought about that on the ride over here when the first time I met Steve. It's back in 1972.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember this. I don't think I had a license, but me and Marlo were running around the city of Pella, hoofing it around. Here comes Steve flying in with Dad's car. His dad's car. And going down to, I think, Centerville. Community High was playing football down there. You remember this, Steve?
Yep, and we went down there.
Yep, and that's the first time I met Steve. And Steve drove us down there, and he was a good Joe. And ever since, he's been a good companion. Always supported me in some of my ideas of conservation and no-till farming.
Yeah.
And
well, I have to admit that I met your father in the early to mid '60s when he was NFO.
active in the National Farmers Organization. Was your dad a member, or my dad?
Yeah. Dad was more NFO than Farm Bureau.
Right. So yeah, that
way
was
back when.
that's a whole new podcast right there.
But that's 50 years ago.
That goes to show the interest your dad had in preserving the national farmers, small farmers, and trying to head off what we're in now facing here, and in this decade of farming and big corporate farms and hog producers and stuff like that.
I think what I enjoy is what I've, through the years, I've enjoyed the fact that we are able to do CRP plantings like this. I wish that we could somehow get more people involved in trying to maintain it properly, as opposed to some of the ways that they have come out with, like with mid-management contracts, where they go in and throw it off and lightly disc it.
It's kind of sad to see that we waste, the guys are not using properly in their conservation reserve program practices. They seem like they just go through the motions, and they might not even mow it the first year. If you're lucky to mow it once, or even into the second, third year, they might not even mow it at all. And they just kind of go through the motions, just trying to get the annual payment, which it's part of it. It's taking ground out of production, but the true management of taking prairie is working at it, seeing what's out there, and and actually cultivating it through mowing practices or control burns or whatever.
My favorite.
Little pyro flip.
I love burning prairie.
Yeah, I know it. So that's a whole new story there too.
I know this seeding. I mean, it's new enough, but it needs to mature a little bit more before I can burn it next year.
So Steve, you started this seeding here 2 years ago. This is the second.
So I seeded it. Well, first of all, in the fall of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I came through with the brush cutter, and then we had it sprayed.
So this was a brome.
It was a brome
CRP going into prairie.
Yes. Yeah.
Reconstruction.
It's interesting. This land was this piece was put in '87, so it's been CRP ever since then. But it's always been brome, and so in order to get more points, and I really pushed. My father is the owner of this property, and I really pushed that. Let's go for more points and more money, and so that's why we went with the prairie grass seeding. So we followed the guidelines: brush cut, sprayed
in the fall,
and then in the spring, I might have I might have been a little bit. I didn't cut it low to the ground. I left it this high because I just wanted to fire. Really
And did
bad.
you burn it
I burned it
before you planted the prairie?
Well, I burned it, and then we sprayed again.
Okay, perfect.
So and then by.
And what time of year did you plant the prairie then?
This was on July 1st then, or June 30th.
I think it was June 31st. So the whole month of June and even into the first part of July, I think is good for prairie planting.
I was impressed. I mean,
and you took me through your field here earlier, so I walked through there and just tell some of the species or that you've seen.
As far as the grasses,
and we used a Hoksy drill here.
Yes.
And we'll go through this a little bit before we get into what actually came up. So this is the drop drill that we design and use, and we feel the prairie gets placed too deep too many times. A lot of seed is wasted that way. So Steve used this, the drop drill, and planted it the last part of June. And all you did is just pulled it over here, hooked your tractor up to it.
Yeah, I mean,
you can go through it and just see. Tell us what you like about this thing.
Well, I like the fact that it's very transportable. This hitch is removable, so it's got a stand on it with the 3-point system. Once you unhook it from whatever mode of transportation you brought it to where you want to seed, you hook it onto the 3-point, lift it up, and remove the tongue. And then the wheels, the transport
cheater
wheels
bar
pick
here.
up.
This little bar comes out here. And the trap thing's up in the air, and you put this in here. And since it's up on the tractor ready, you just pull this back and pull a pin out here and pop another pin, and these transport wheels for road transporting will set parallel in here.
So it's a very simple design that is very user friendly. So anybody that I mean, if I could figure it out, then most people can.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's up, you're down, you're planting on the drive wheel system there. This here's the drive. So when the planter's up in the air, you're not planting, and when it's down on the ground, it's planting for you.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you don't have any worries about that.
It's easy to maneuver too when you're planting. You know, you just lift it to your end row.
Right. So it's easy to turn around a sharp corner just by lifting up in 3-point, and it's actually better for going through mud situation. Was it muddy when you planted, or Steve? It was pretty dry.
It was fairly dry. There was
First of
one
July
spot
is dry
over there that I had to go around, but yeah.
Well, I got really wet there last part of June, and we got pushed back, and actually we got some delayed planting things into the first week, into the first week in July, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so that's probably where you fed it. So we were very wet there. We were dry early, then got very wet, and then it kind of turned dry and
again,
and stayed dry through most of summer. So you was kind of worried about.
Oh heavens! I was sitting there going, "Oh crap!" But I have to say one thing. I love the harrow system because I think it tickles the ground enough that with prairie seed, the point is you don't bury it in the ground. Even a quarter of an inch is almost too deep.
Yes.
To some extent. The harrow just kind of, it scarifies the ground, gets the dirt to kind of move around it.
And so when it rains, it actually kind of just melts in as all one piece, one cover for those seeds to start coming out.
Yes.
And it also, some of the residue you have on the ground there from the dead weeds from after the last Roundup application acts kind of like a mulch to kind of hold the moisture for the seeds to get them up and growing.
Yeah.
So that's a very good, interesting thing, because it did turn dry after you planted it.
Oh, I know. That's why.
You probably didn't get a rain till what, late September, maybe?
Well, the beans.
Or August?
Didn't do bad. I know we got some rains there towards the middle to end of August then, but yeah, for the month of July, it was fairly dry, if I remember correctly.
Oh, it was. I knew it. We had a lot of people concerned about it too, and I was concerned too, and I want people to have success with their seeding.
So, and then in talking about when I was seeding, the system that you have for when you bagged up my species, my grass species, and then you had the flowers and forbs in a different bag.
So we usually put our grasses all together, the fluffy seeds, and then put the forbs in a separate bag, the heavier seeds, because we feel if you mix it in all together in a one mix, the heavy stuff has a tendency to, wildflowers have a tendency to come out first. So did you just top dress the wildflowers?
I top dressed the wildflowers, but I followed your recommendation of approximately every 3 acres.
Yeah, the more you do it, the better stand you have. The more you do it. Some guys will only do it, twice on a 10-acre piece.
Yeah.
Or a 5-acre bag, and I like to, if you want it done right, you should make a couple rounds, put a little bit in, just keep adding a little bit, and I keep it churned up, and that makes sure that you get a better stand on the long run that way.
And that's what I did, and I know the black-eyed Susans and the gray-headed coneflowers they've already flowered, but this field was yellow 3 weeks ago. It was just yellow.
Well,
and I felt very good that you recommended that because that's how I got a great overall seeding of flowers, which I thought which I love it. I mean, that's a part. The flowers are just as much of a prairie as the grasses.
They work together for
Yes.
ecosystem. So that's one of the things, big thing is the pollinator, get those flowers working. And you start putting flower seeds in very deep, and you're not going to have very good success getting them up, period.
No. So I even and then you couldn't, I can't remember why, but I had the purple coneflower.
Purple prairie clover? Coneflower or prairie clover?
Coneflower. Because you gave me that in a separate bag. I don't know. Do you remember why? I'm trying to remember.
I don't remember why, because I think you wanted some.
Yes, I did. I did. I said,
that's why we try to keep our customers happy. It doesn't seem like a prairie without some coneflower in there. Sometimes we make a mix that's, it's cost effective, but it's, if you want that pretty stuff in there, whether it's butterfly milkweed or purple prairie clover or pale purple coneflower, it costs a little more money to do that.
I mean, they're harder to harvest.
But they got, there's a reason why they're a little more expensive. That's it.
It's all part of it.
Usually you get what you want out of a CRP mix. You can go to the economy mix and get some cheap stuff and just go through the motions, or you can get a nice quality mix and benefit from that years down the road by paying a little more up front. And the NRCSs are cost sharing on part of that anyway. So I think it's very impressive because you see a lot of young plants out there. They're not very big, whether it's Cytosgrama or, even the big blue stem. It's a young, tender plant. So they're not any bigger than this round. And next year they'll be this big.
Yeah,
the clumps will be bigger.
Yeah.
And so this time next year it'll be more dominant. This time of year, big blue and the Canada Wild Rise and the Virginias rather than some of this, mare's tail up here right now. But that's just part of the transition. It usually takes, 3 years to get it established. And I think you've done very well after 1 year.
Oh, I feel very good.
So are you going to just let it go here? Or are you going to mow it down or what do you?
There's a few spots I need to come in and brush cut just to knock it back.
And that's a good management tool here with CRP acres.
Yes.
We were talking earlier about doing some of that, just to head off some of the invasive, noxious weeds, whether it's, full thistle or whatever.
The more competition you have, the less that the prairie plants have.
Right.
The right to, or the ability to do.
So that young plant is still very young yet, and doesn't have much of a root system since it was only planted a year ago, and it's it's very sensitive this year. And lucky enough, it got a good start last year. The stuff you're seeing up now got started last year, and granted there will be some that didn't come up last year will be coming up, trying to come up yet this year in year
true.
2.
Yep.
In year 2. And sometimes it takes 3 years to get some of that. Not everything in your mix, but there's some of the native species that takes 2-3 years.
Yeah, because the switchgrass out there seems to be the most dominant or prominent as the one that's really taken off. The big blue stem is, might be about waist high.
Mm-hmm.
The same with the Indian grass, but there's some switchgrass that's really been taken off in there. And then,
switchgrass is a little earlier bloomer, or matures a little earlier in our harvest season. And then comes the Indian grass. So Indian grass in our production fields is not, barely any of them are shooting heads yet. And big blue stem's just starting to come up with its claw. And, switchgrass has been around for 2-3 weeks already. And it'll actually be harvested here, end of this month, end of September, I guess. But in August versus September.
Yeah, for the flowers in the forbs, what does Hoxie seed produce? That, I mean, on your operation.
Oh. We got quite a list here, so
you do?
Yeah, we got black-eyed Susan. We got sweet black-eyed Susan right now in full bloom, and that's a late bloomer. And he gets a little taller. We got the pale purple coneflower. We got the rough blazing star. We have the sky blue aster. We have the prairie blazing star. We have the wild bergamot. We got the rattlesnake master, and we harvested some
weed.
Pardon me?
Ironweed.
We have that, and Canada anemone, we harvest that too long ago, and we raised butterfly milkweed, swamp milkweed, rural milkweed, which is a nice one.
Yeah.
So, and these are all locally sourced right around my area, whether it's Mahaska County, Jasper County, or Poweshiek, and so some of it come from Iowa County. The rattlesnake master did. So.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question, because as I'm going through my native prairie mind, and I'm going, it would be nice to be able to go in and be able to overseed with some of the forbs and flowers that weren't in the mix.
Upgrade the mix here, the field, the prairie, upgrade the prairie.
And I'm assuming that is something that can be done then?
It can be done, but it's like anything. After you start it, it takes a lot of mowing. So you probably need to mow it a couple years to allow it to start.
Oh, really?
And
so even though you already have an established prairie.
Right. So even the established prairie that's coming up now, you start introducing other species to it, it can soon choke out that young new seedling.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or unless you really want to put a lot out there, and work off the numbers. Put more.
and those numbers get a little pricey, don't they?
They can, but your results are a little better. And a guy like you, Steve, would like those results.
Yeah, why not? The world is my oyster.
So the
upfront costs. Yes, between the NRCS and the FSA. Yes, and it's great that there's cost share and stuff. But and I know there's limits to what can that can be allotted and stuff. And so that was one of the things that I thought of even when I was seeding. I was going,
Well, there's more contracts coming up in years to come, and maybe you can expand on them, put a little more elaborate mixes out there, and take some of that and slowly hand harvest that and introduce it here, or whatever you want to do. But if you're going to introduce that, I would definitely recommend it to mow it the first year. And I probably would recommend a dormant seeding, maybe, in November.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
In November or so, and then give it some of it takes a freeze thaw to break its...
what about right after a burn?
Fall burn?
What about a spring burn?
Spring burn? I don't have a problem doing it. That's all right, too. You can introduce it then, but then mow it after that.
After that, okay.
Yeah, you can do it. But you got to remember, some of those flowers, it takes a little more cold scarification to get that.
Yeah, that's
why if you go in November, and and kind of shake them down with the harl and get them down to the bottom. And then you can burn it because heat goes up, and then those seeds won't hurt that. You won't be burning the seeds because they'll be sitting close to the surface of the soil.
Okay.
So they won't really be affected too much by that heat of the fire.
Okay. And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of burning, and if I remember correctly, fall burns are good for flowers.
Correct.
Spring burns are good for grasses.
Right. So if you got brome coming in your prairie, you know, a fall burn won't really do that much to it. But brome, a late prairie burn, like in April, will retard the brome in your prairie.
Big time, yeah, okay.
But some of your wildflowers are coming up then too.
I know.
But if you allow some of your wildflowers that are growing out of here and let them go to seed, that the ones that didn't make it through the burn, the offsprings of the seeds that were there from that plant that didn't make it, come up after the burn, along with your other ones.
Yeah, because I mean, and in thinking, going back to what I was thinking about in introducing more species, is that I could pick some spots and do spot burns too if I wanted to go that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, I know there's getting to be more and more emphasis on like carbon credits and stuff like that, and then also for the monarch butterfly that I just saw fly here, in trying to create more of a habitat for nectar. And,
So I think those, pollinators, an area for pollinators in this field of, I don't know, 10, 15 acres.
15 acres, yeah.
You can have, 1 acre of a strong mix here of a pollinator and maybe another one over there. And rather than have it all spread out through that 16 acres, they might have a hard time finding it, but, have an area just designated there. And maybe, over the years, some of those plants will migrate out into
easily. By the wind.
Yeah.
I mean, the wind is
nature's way of moving things.
Yeah. And also
the deer.
Yep. No, there's no deer out here.
Got his ears poking up listening to you. That's Steve.
Well, I hope you feel like I did sitting here listening to these guys talk. So much information to pick up on. I think I learned more in the last 25 minutes than I have in the last 25 days of working on the prairie. But just so worth it to do it the right way. And that's what Steve has shown us here, both from preparing the ground in the off season for planting during, planting season, to using the right equipment like what we have here at Hoxie Native Seeds, to consulting with people that know prairie. And the other thing I want to mention there too is you see the connection that Steve has built with the land. He lives close to it, he values it, and that comes from being involved intimately with the ground that we live on.